and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Ciphr, the Budget 2024, What HR and Payroll Need to Know. I'm joined by our panel of experts here today. I'm just going to say hi to everyone. Hi to Claire Williams, our Chief Operating Officer and Chief People Officer. How are you, Claire?
Very well, thank you. How are you, Catherine?
Thank you. And I also joined by our Managing Director of Payroll. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
And Gwennon West, our Head of People Operations. Hi, Gwennon.
Hi, Catherine.
And finally, last but by no means not least, Claire Warner, our Regulatory Analyst and Resident Payroll Boffin. Hi, Claire, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. So here's a look at today's agenda. We're going to give you an overview of the budget and some context about sort of the landscape we're operating in. And then we'll take you through detailed analysis of areas such as national insurance contributions and other taxes, national minimum wage. We'll also take a look at apprenticeships and skills training. And then we're going to offer you some next steps, both for HR professionals and for payroll professionals as well. And our panel are here to take your questions at the end of the broadcast. For your questions, you can send those in using the Q&A panel that you'll see on your screen. There's also an area for a public chat where you can say hi and discuss topics amongst yourselves. And maybe if you have queries, you can try and self-diagnose your problems. That always works quite nicely. So do drop in there if you can. If you haven't come across Ciphr before, we're a leading people management solutions provider here in the UK, as well as central HR software. We also offer payroll software, as well as managed and outsourced, bureau and outsourced payroll, and onboarding software, recruitment, and LMS and e-learning content. We're trusted by more than 600 clients across the UK, and a large proportion of our own team are either ex-customers or HR professionals. So we know the challenges that you face and how to help you overcome them. We won't be going into any of those services and solutions today, but if you want to find out more at any time, you can find us at ciphr.com or email us at info@ciphr.com, and one of our experts will happily be in touch to share a little bit more about us. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Julie just for an overview and some context about what we're talking about today.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for that introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here with us today. As payroll and HR professionals, you guys are at the heart of how changes in government policy play out for organisations and for employees right across the UK. And that ranges from national insurance adjustments to changes in employment law and benefits. And each of you will play a crucial role in interpreting these changes. And today, this session is all about helping you and guiding you through that process. Next slide, please, Catherine. Thank you. So the new government's agenda is designed to address issues in the economy and improve the quality of life, with the emphasis on fair distribution of wealth and opportunity. So what we're going to do now is take an in-depth look at some key specifics of the autumn budget, and Claire is very kindly going to walk you through some of those key bits of information. Over to you, Claire.
Thanks, Julie. So we're going to do a start on tax and national insurance here. We all know from the media that's been going around since the budget last week that there have been some significant changes to employers' national insurance. The secondary threshold, or ST, has been lowered not quite by 50%, but almost from April, increasing the amount of employers' NIC due on every employee. And I'm going to show you some examples of how that might impact you. As well as that, which was a real surprise to most of us, I think, we got the expected employers' national insurance hike from 13.8 to 15%, which is significant, and it applies even to public sector. I've seen some stuff going around online about it doesn't apply to public sector, and some payroll professionals panicking that we might have to do two different NIC calculations. It does apply to public sector. The NI calculation will be the same for every payroll that we operate. The funding to counteract that will come directly from government to local government. So we only have that one calculation to do. So let's put that rumour to bed straight away. The 15% rate increase does, however, also apply to Class 1A and Class 1B national insurance. So for PAYE settlements and for benefits in kind. So again, maybe not wholly unexpected. The NI for employing veterans has been extended for another year. That was due to finish and has been extended. So that's great news for employers looking to take on veterans. The lower earnings limit, we didn't hear an awful lot about these limits in the budget, but it has been increased by £2 a week, moving us to £125 per week, or £6,500 per year. Now, that's significant because the LEL is now above the secondary threshold for employers. So that is a significant, and possibly it's the first time I've known that be the case in all my years of doing payroll. The NI and tax thresholds are going to remain frozen until 2028-29. We did know that had been announced years ago. So that wasn't a surprise. But after that, we're told that they will start increasing. So, and moving on then to the changes in national insurance for employers. These are the thresholds that HMRC published last week. I've just taken a snapshot of those, and it just shows us what those rates are when we're doing those calculations. And we can see there, looking at those first three columns, the LEL is now 125, but the secondary threshold is now down to £96. That means that the employer begins paying national insurance after the employee earns £96, but the employee doesn't begin to pay until they're earning £125. So again, we're doing two different calculations. And that does have some significance. It is going to make those costs go up for employers. To demonstrate those increases, I tried putting some examples together. Now, please bear in mind, these examples do not include the ability to claim back via employment allowance, which we'll go on and discuss in a minute. But I looked at round about an average salary for an employee over 21 earning roughly £35,000. That's your first row on there. That increase to the employer in national insurance alone is £926 a year. And if you take it down to, there's no increase in national insurance for those under 18 because there is no employer's NI. But any employee over the age of 21, you can see it's roughly £1,000, give or take a little bit. Now, that would tell us that every employee we have is going to cost the employer an extra £1,000 just in national insurance. So what else do we need to be looking at? Well, the government changed the employment allowance. They've increased that so that employers who qualify and are eligible, sorry, struggling with words this morning, eligible will be able to claim up to £10,500 back from those additional costs. The current cap of £100,000 for eligibility has been removed, but the other qualifying criteria remain the same. You can claim if you're a business or a charity or a connected company, but only one of those connected companies can claim. You can't claim if you're a public body or a business doing more than 50% of your work in the public sector. Now, that can have a significant impact unless you're a charity. You can't claim if it's a single director only payroll. And there are certain other employers that need to be excluded. But the criteria haven't changed. So it may be that just with the removal of that £100,000 limit for previous year's NIC liability, employers now qualify. But it's certainly worth going and having a look to see if you will qualify, because do you know what? If you can get 10.5 grand back, you can get 10.5 grand back. It's got to be worth using. And that's managed through systems usually. That's not anything too scary. And moving on again to tax changes. So the thresholds remain unchanged. We knew that. The married couples and blind persons allowance, but by just 1.7%. So the new rates are showing on there. But everybody else's tax-free allowance remains unchanged, as it has for the last few years. I just also wanted to highlight at this point that this week HMRC has launched a Don't Get Caught Out campaign to help people understand tax and understand that not all tax advice is good advice. But I'm highlighting this simply because we heard in the budget that HMRC are going to extend compliance checks. They're going to recruit more people to help with catching fraud and tax avoidance. So it's worth just double checking that everything we do actually complies. So I'm now going to stop talking and hand over to Gwennon and have a bit of a breather. Gwennon and Claire, this one's all yours.
Thank you. So obviously, just from what Claire's just been talking about, the cost of employing an individual is going to increase, which means many of us who've just gone through a budget will probably have to go back to the drawing board on that one and do some reforecasting on our figures for 2025. So that could impact our EBITDAs. It could impact any salary increases we were preparing to do next year. It might affect our recruitment budgets for next year, and in some instances, for some businesses, that might actually mean that they cannot afford to employ the amount of people that they employ, and some reductions might have to be done. So, lots of effect there. It's good for the employee, obviously, getting more money into their bank accounts, but for an employer, the cost of actually employing individuals is actually going to go up. So obviously we're going to need to start getting creative with some of our offerings, but because the NI for employees are going up, it will actually start making salary sacrifices a little bit more attractive to our CFOs. So but on the back end of that, we'll need to also take into account the fact that national minimum wage is going up, so less people will be able to take on a salary sacrifice because they can't go below that national minimum wage. So there's lots of things to consider there for us in the benefits that we offer, and to try and get that in a creative way. We'll probably need to look at some of our current salary sacrifice arrangements because that national minimum wage is going up. Does that affect some salary sacrifices that we've already got in place, and some of those agreements, the long-term agreements we've got in place with things like pensions, people putting additional money into their pension via salary sacrifice? We'll probably have to go back and review that with our payroll colleagues to make sure that people aren't going below the national minimum wage. And this is all during all of those changes that we've got with employment law, and so it's going to be a really busy time for us within the HR teams. Do you tend to agree with that, Claire? Yeah. Is it something that on a broader scale with the organisation?
Yeah, I think employers shouldn't underestimate the heavy lift that's coming for both their HR teams and their organisations as a whole. As Gwennon's mentioned, obviously the cost challenge is the number one that certainly at board level a lot of employers will be focusing on. And fundamentally looking at how they could potentially offset those costs elsewhere. So that could have, as Gwennon said, a negative impact on reward packages or overall workforce size and costs. So I think my recommendations would be to conduct a detailed review of benefits and compensation that aligns with the new tax thresholds, but ensuring that the packages remain competitive and attractive. That's going to be the key thing, is how can you mitigate some of that cost impact whilst ensuring that you're providing competitive reward packages for your employees. I think in addition to that, employers might well look to take steps to accelerate any transformational work that they've already got underway so that they can realise those efficiency gains from a headcount perspective. I think that would be a really big focus on what are the priorities and the objectives that companies are currently working towards, and do they need to pivot some of those to make sure that they are driving efficiency gains where possible. And I think it will also see an uptick in companies considering whether they could offshore or digitalise roles. So again, just ways that they can look to mitigate some of that cost impact. To Claire's point, if you're thinking £1,000 more per employee on average, that stacks up incredibly quickly, even if you've just got a few dozen employees in your workforce, let alone if you get into the thousands. So it is a challenge. I think we will see quite an impact on the labour market as it gets harder to afford to hire. So it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out over the next 12 to 18 months and beyond.
Yeah, and you know, within our own teams, we're going to need to look at, you know, how we can get all of those changes across the line, make sure that we're keeping safe. You know, do we need to think about our own teams and how many people we've got in our teams, and how more efficient we can work to get all of those things over the line over the next 18 months.
I think it will just need some really significant focus from employers on their priorities, and they're making sure all of their work and efforts are aligned to the outcomes that they need to be achieving, factoring in now the cost challenge that needs to be achieved within that period, potentially, if you are in a position where you can't easily absorb that additional cost.
Yeah, definitely. So we're just going to hand over back to Julie, I think, just as a little bit of a heads up on some other things that came out from the budget.
Thanks, Gwenyn. This one very much is a heads up. It was a small box in the budget that said, hey, guess what? We're going to work really hard at simplifying tax. And that's pretty much all it says. What's on the screen is the only content throughout the entire document. But that could have a huge implication. Don't get me wrong, it'd be great to simplify tax so that every single person that works in the UK understands how their tax is calculated and deducted. And it is really complex. And there is an argument for saying your tax is never 100% accurate because you've always got the reconciliation at year end. So I understand why we'd want to simplify it, but this could be huge. This could be bigger than the introduction of RTI. So we're connected now. We're going to work in a working party. We'll work with HMRC to really understand what this plan is, a bit like what we did when RTI came out. And we'll keep you posted. As we learn more, we'll do some micro webinars and we'll keep you briefed. Just have it on your radar that this might be a big change, might be the biggest change that we've seen in our careers in payroll. So just one to watch out for, guys.
I think I could just add to that, Julie. We know that PAYE tax collection is one of the most efficient ways for them to collect tax. So it would never surprise me if more came into that remit. I'm not quite sure how, but they know that that's a regular amount coming in. And is likely to be one of their targeted areas to simplify. So it'll be interesting. Life will be interesting.
It's one to watch. Right. We will share what we learn with everybody. That's what these sessions are all about, helping each other out.
So that's back to me then, I think, for pay minimum wage, and we'll share a bit about benefits under this section. So sorry, I'm pressing too many buttons here. So minimum wage and living wage, we knew in advance of the budget that they were going up. We didn't know, we knew they were going to be significant. There'd been rumours about removing the age bands and stuff like that. So they haven't removed the age bands as yet. That is on their target. But the difference in the rates between the groups has been reduced significantly. And that actually means that some of those workers are getting between 16 and 18% salary increases from April. So, okay, those changes are often included in software so that will help you monitor what those changes are and make sure that you are remaining compliant. but they are going to have a significant impact on employers' costs, particularly in certain industries where, for example, lots of students are employed, or hospitality. And the cost of employing an experienced person over somebody that you have to train and manage has been, that there's been a significant reduction in the benefit to not employing students, for example. Reviewing, as Gwennan's already said, salary sacrifice to ensure they remain compliant. We're going to need to look at additional reporting to make sure compliance remains. Because, as I've already mentioned, HMRC are recruiting more compliance staff. National minimum wage, national living wage is one of the key areas that they audit when they come out and check. So don't be complacent about that. It was a throwaway comment almost that they're recruiting more staff. They're recruiting more staff for a reason. And just to show you what those rates are, we can see there that the living wage for over 21s from April next year will be £12.21. 18 to 20-year-olds, it's going to be £10, and you can see what those extra differences are there. Don't forget that the accommodation offset is also going to change if you're doing any of those calculations. So we need to adjust for that as well. But you can see that the accommodation offset went up a mere 0.7%, whereas the 16 to 17-year-old rate went up 18%, as did the apprenticeship rate. So they aren't insignificant in those changes. So let's have a look then. This is the same chart that I showed you earlier, but this time I'm looking at what those total charges are going to be. So over the first row there, that employee hasn't had a salary increase, so that increase remains exactly the same as it was on the previous one. But look at what happens when you look at somebody on minimum wage earning at 37.5 hours a week. That total cost for a year has gone up to £2,500. Now, again, this isn't taking into account what we can claim back through the EA, but the cost of taking on an apprentice under 25 has gone up to over £2,000. And somebody that is just working, say a student that's working 10 hours a week in a supermarket, for example, at minimum wage, the cost to that supermarket has gone up over £700. That's just in minimum wage changes. So we can see how much the impact's going to have on bottom lines for employers. Again, back to Gwennan's point about going back to your budgets. If you've already done them for next year, you're going to need to do them again. Then we also have a little bit about company car rates. So they announced some changes to the company car rates and the benefits that they would go, particularly for electronic vehicles. Electric, whichever. So again, looking at those, we also need to look at the van and car benefit charge and fuel charge. They are going to go up by 1.7%, and I've put those amounts in that chart there. Again, let's review what those cost implications are for the employee in this case, because it's a tax on the employee. And in some cases, it may be that providing a company car to an employee is no longer cost effective from a tax perspective for them. So it's something to look at and review. And looking at the planning then, rates are published early, so it's great. We can do calculations early. We can communicate with our employees. But there was one thing that they snuck in that they didn't speak about within the budget speech itself, and that's the reversal of the tax treatment for double cab pickups and with their payload. The decision has been made to reverse the previous government's decision. These will be treated as cars for tax and benefit benefits in kind costings. That could be significant. They've gone from a flat rate van charge to a car charge, and there is amended guidance out there. There will be transitional rules in place for those that already have a vehicle up until 2029. So anybody that actually signs a lease deal up until April, there will be transitional rules in place for you. But for companies that certainly use those type of vehicles, that was a hidden one and will have significant impact on the employee's tax bill. So worth a look at. And then I'm going to shut up again and hand over to the powers that know all about HR and the wider business. So Gwennon and Claire, back to you.
Thank you. So obviously the fact that the government has actually announced in advance what the plans are for the next 5 years, it gives us the ability to review the current offering and gives us enough time to make phase changes and to communicate those changes with employees. But as Claire said, you know, the fact that the all of these taxes are actually on the employee or not on the business, it might mean that the actually offering a company car might not feel like a benefit anymore to employees. So it's just having that review of your company car strategy of deciding whether it's actually cost effective to actually provide company cars, or whether there's a different mechanism like an allowance that we could offer instead, because it's you know, less admin on our part, but also means that it's a bit more cost effective for employees. On the flip side of that, obviously, if you've got an internal fleet department, then that is going to hit them quite hard if we suddenly decide that we're not going to have a fleet and therefore do away with company cars completely and move into sort of an allowance. So that's a much wider decision for companies to make. So, you know, whether you have got an internal fleet department or you outsource it, it's a really good time to start reviewing what the changes will make. Sorry, the lights have suddenly come on because I've moved. So it's a really good time to sort of look at your policies, look at your contracts. Is there anything in there that needs changing? So if we're suddenly deciding that we're going to move away from company cars to allowances, then there's a whole raft of changes with policies and contracts that we will need to start reviewing in sort of in the next 5 years. So luckily we've got that time to be able to phase it out and take that time. So Claire, with your board hat on, what do you think the impact of these changes
yeah,
are?
I mean, I think it still comes back to that wider piece around reviewing your overall reward strategy, and what elements you feel are going to have the biggest cost impacts that you can leverage. Some things simply will incur more costs, but to dismantle them will be so disruptive to the organisation that it's not worth doing. You know, if you flip from company cars to car allowances, for example, the onus and the work in relation to health and safety and the onus on the employees completely changes. It's, you know, it is a bigger consideration that I think needs to form that wider reward strategy planning. As you said, we've got the time to plan. So typically with company cars, you know, you're locked in for a number of years in relation to the lease cycles that you're on. So there is that time to plan. But I would just, recommend that with all of these things, it's probably going to do most organisations the most benefit to look at gains across their cost base versus large transformational changes, because it won't be a silver bullet in how you can cover that cost challenge. It's likely that you will, to back to my point, look at the overall reward strategy and look at where you can make tweaks and changes that are going to both mitigate the impact on the organisation, but have that employee first view. Actually, how are you going to make sure that the employees aren't missing out in any possible way you can? We're already in a cost of living crisis situation, so it's a massive challenge. I don't think there is a single answer as to how companies are going to achieve it, but this is obviously just one aspect. If you do deploy company cars that you can look to leverage potentially.
Yeah, it's it's one of those really hard decisions, because company cars have always been seen as a bit of a gravitas of, oh, I've got this wonderful company car. So it's quite an emotional. I think it would be quite emotional decisions for this, especially on employees side. It is, if they've seen the impact on their pay at the end, then that's probably going to be the decision, isn't it? Is if it's easier on their pay packet rather
completely.
than
Anything pay related is always going to be emotive. So I think anything you're doing as an organisation has to be incredibly considered in relation to how you're going to consult and consider the employees that are ultimately going to be impacted by it. Yes, as a with a board cap on, my responsibility is think about protecting the organisation as a whole and its people. But I think when you're working specifically within the HR and the payroll teams, you need to be considering how you are going to help and guide and support employees through those changes, because that disruption alone could cause more detrimental impact on the business. So yeah, that focus on how you can protect your employees should be at the forefront of your mind through this, not just necessarily the cost aspect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good. So Claire, I hope you've had enough time to have a bit of a rest for your voice, because I'm just going to just to talk around the payrolling of benefits in kind, just on a payroll point of view.
Yes, thank you. I've had a bit of a drink of tea. This is a lot of me, but it's that time of year, so I guess that's fine. So payrolling of benefits in kind, we did a whole webinar on this back, it seems like yesterday, but it was in the summer at some point. And this has now been confirmed. It hadn't been confirmed. It was just assumed, if you like, that from April 2026, there was a rumour, if you want to use that term, that payrolling was going to become mandatory. That has now been confirmed. All benefits will be payrolled mandatory from April 2026, except, and the two items that they were struggling with have been excluded. So that is employee related loans and accommodation. They'll be able to continue to deliver benefits via a P11D. We think it's going to be a mini P11D, but the P11D as we know it at this point is no longer going to be available. We are going to need to look at systems, at configuration, at again, another change in terms of cost, because Class 1 NIC will not be an annual cost that it has been. It will be a real-time, every month cost. So again, an impact on budget potentially. And as a payroll team, we need to look at the configuration of the system, but also if we need to collect additional data in order for this to go smoothly from April 2026. Some companies might already have their P11Ds, for example, on a third-party piece of software. That's going to need to be moved on to the payroll. So from that point of view, we've got a lot to consider, and only, and I say this loosely here, 18 months to look at getting it sorted. That isn't a long time in terms of design, delivery, testing, and everything else. And although payrolling has been around for a while, there's an awful lot of companies that aren't using it as yet. So that's from a payroll and what's happening perspective. Claire, Gwennon, from the HR side of it?
Yeah, so for someone who used to be heavily involved in doing P11Ds in my earlier career, it's really good to me. It's good news that it's now going on to this benefit in kind, because we've been actually doing it within Ciphr here. We've been payrolling for definitely a few years now, where everything goes through the payroll. So it just shifts that massive annual admin that used to happen on an annual basis, where you have to make sure that all the data is there, and you're looking back. You're now having to do that on a monthly basis. So in a way, it just shifts the admin from being annual to monthly, but then it allows us to sort of spread that out over the year. But to me, I think it actually assists in picking up errors a lot quicker. So, for example, you notice it in your pay packet if your, say, your company car allowance, company car amount is wrong, or your the allowance for your I'm trying to remember the allowances that we have now. Private medical, for example, you will see it coming through your pay slip on a monthly basis, so you'll be able to go, oh, that doesn't look right. Whereas in the past, you'd get your P11D. If you didn't pick it up in your P11, your draft P11D, then it went through, and then you're paying your tax, and then you might pick it up at a later date, and then you're trying to resolve that. It's a lot harder. So, I think it will reduce the amount of errors because the employees will see it on a more regular basis and therefore be able to pick things up. But it's obviously it does mean that you have to make sure that the data that is going in on a monthly basis is correct, and that onus will be on HR, working very closely with payroll, making sure that they're getting the right data. So depending on whether you actually have a pay link from your HR system into your payroll system, or some form of automated way of sending your data, that obviously makes it a lot easier. It's just lots of admin to make sure that you get the right data in the first place. But if you're having to do manual notifications to your payroll, this is where you'll need to make sure that that data is absolutely correct and that there are no errors, and that maybe some spot checking will need to be done on a sort of quarterly basis to make sure that what you've got in HR matches what you've got in payroll. So the onus sort of shifts a little bit to be a bit more spread across the year rather than just at that point where you're doing the P11Ds and making sure that the data is correct. So that does obviously mean that the work, again, on top of all the other things that we're going to be doing, if you're checking payroll, you need to be on top of those allowances that are going through for benefit in kind. So just making sure that when you start an allowance that they're the correct amount, and when you end an allowance that they end in a timely manner, and also just making spot checks, maybe possibly quarterly, to make sure that those match with what you're expecting from payroll and HR point of view. So Claire, do you think of anything on a wider scale for the organisation?
Yeah, it's mainly just the kind of note I put there is around the kind of the cash flow and the budgeting side.
Yeah.
You know, if we've typically had more of those costs, and you know, at a single point in time versus monthly costs, then that will be the kind of main impact. And you put obviously about employee communication as well. I do think that's really important. You know, we still get employees say, when am I getting my P11D?
Yeah.
And you know, even though we've been doing it for a number of years. So you know, I think it's just, again, taking your employees along the journey, even if there's things that they don't necessarily see or need to be aware of. There's no harm in making sure you're proactively talking to your employees in the business about what you're doing in response to all these changes, even if it's just to reassure them we're compliant. Hey, we've made the changes, we've looked at our processes, we've looked at our resourcing, we're good to go. So yeah, I think actually it's yes, there is the element to consider around cash flow and forecasting, but actually I think it is still back to the people first approach for how you're just how you're communicating the change to processes. I actually don't know if Julie's got anything to add on that as well from a company-wide perspective or not. Or
I think it's worth explaining to employees around, you know, at the moment what they're used to is the annual event of a P11D, and possibly as a consequence of the data in that, a change to the tax code. It'll happen real time. So we need to be aware of that. And one thing to please communicate with your employees, because it's really important they check, is when you transition to payrolling benefits, potentially in the first year, you could be in a position where the calculations are coming through accurately based on the benefits, and the deductions are accurate, but then a tax code change comes in based on the previous year's P11D. And we could end up in a situation where, you know, people are potentially being, you know, paying double. So they need to be vigilant. They need to be checking. You know, perhaps give them some comms around, you know, lines for HMRC to talk to. We need education on what the implications mean.
I don't know how many employees actually do a detailed check of their payslip each month when it comes through, but it's not many. I wouldn't assume. And, you know, I think just providing them with some guidance on this is what goes through each month, this is how your tax works, you know, at a high level. We can't obviously cater for kind of every single individual, but these are the things for you to be looking at. You should be proactively looking at your payslip. You know, we will be doing all the checks we possibly can, but there is always a risk that there will be something that happens, or a change, as you said, from a tax code perspective, that they'll not understand. And as employers, it's absolutely our duty to make sure that we answer the questions we can and provide them with directions and signposts to those places they can go, so that they can get that advice and reassurance from the right time, whether it's from HMRC or other bodies. Because it is, you know, back to that point, it is such an emotive topic, and everyone has got such a focus on finances right now in relation to being a cost of living, you know, the cost of living crisis. It's such a bad time in lots of ways, because, you know, it is such a huge topic already. But I think that point's really relevant, Julie.
Yeah, definitely some sort of financial awareness training for employees, just, you know, how to check that your payslip is correct, because it is, you know, it can look very confusing, because it looks like you're being given money and then taken money out. So it, you know, when we first started it, there was lots of questions around oh, I'm suddenly getting some extra money, but actually you go, well, you're having it, but you're actually having it taken away at the same time. And the first time that they do see those pay slips with all of the allowances going through, it can be quite confusing, and it does make the pay slips quite busy if you're doing lots of benefits. So we're lucky in Ciphr, we do lots of benefits, but then they do have to go through the benefits in kind, so their pay slips do look quite busy with allowances coming in and out, and it can get quite confusing. And Claire Warner, I did think, and I think Julie just might have talked about it just quickly now, around the first year that you will do it, there will be that consequence of still having the P11D data from the previous year in your tax code, but also doing the live benefits in kind. Is that correct, isn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely potential for that to happen. There are currently no provisions to stop that I'm aware of. There's no transitional implementation. But what I will say is we do not have full guidance for benefit in kind changes for payrolling as yet. We have been promised them by the end of 2025, which isn't particularly helpful for planning. So yeah, we know bits, but we don't know everything. But that is certainly, there is that risk, as Julie said, because you start it from April 2026, but you've also had that benefit in 2025. So you'll have had a P11D submitted as well. So come about November time, maybe, when they get round to processing those last final P11Ds, there is an option for your tax code to change. The other thing I wanted to just reiterate is that the admin burden, although it has changed, it means that if there is a change, payroll need to be notified as quickly as possible, because any benefit change has to be calculated over the remainder of that tax year. So if that benefit, for example, if their company car changes in November or September, we've got to do that recalc for the remaining 6 months of that year. So it's back to that. Everything is key. Communication is vital. Yeah,
I think this is where HR and payroll will need to start working a lot closer together in making sure that data gets to payroll in a timely manner, and it, regardless of whether you do it manually or through a pay link, or you have in-house or out or external or a bureau, it is that communication is going to be key, isn't it, over the just going forward, really.
Yeah, and I think it's, whereas historically you've kind of had a year to get those changes documented. If you now delay sharing that information for 3 months, that benefit is going to be squeezed into a 3-month window for cost instead of a 6-month window, and that can be significant to the employee as well. So processes will need to change, communications will need to improve, and And I think it is just about knowing what these impacts are and the fact that we don't have a year to make those changes now.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So, and I can see lots of questions coming in, but we'll try and catch those at the end, if that's okay.
Right, got one other point on this before we move on, Gwen, if that's okay. So for payroll professionals in this webinar, just to make sure you're aware, you can only start payrolling benefits at the beginning of a tax year. So you either go live with this April 25 or April 26. Either way, you have to be registered with HMRC to actually payroll benefits. So you can do that now, irrespective of when you're thinking of going live with it. So my advice would be do that sooner rather than later. Get all your ducks in a row. There'd be nothing worse than hurtling towards the deadline and you're left with not enough time to get yourself live. Also, talk to your software supplier, as Claire was explaining before. Configuration will need to take place. You don't want to be in a position with your payroll provider that everybody's asking for those changes at the same time and there aren't enough resources to get you all live in time for the switchover. So if you are in a position to be able to act now and maybe do it for April 25, that might be an easier ride for you than waiting till April 26. Thank you.
That's a good call. Thanks, Julie. So we're just going to move. We're definitely going to give you a break now, Claire Warner, so you can have a good bit of tea. So we're just going to move on to training and skills. So the government announced £40 million investment to transform the apprenticeship levy, and then now going to rename that into growth and skills levy. So you can now allocate 50% of your levy beyond the traditional apprenticeship. So you can now do shorter courses for key areas, and those key areas are digital skills, social care, and green technologies. So this all evolves from a report from Skills England that was published in about September time, I think, that found that investment in training had declined significantly over the last decade. So this is the government's way of trying to make businesses almost to prompt them to do more towards investing into their into training areas. So they've also improved access for young people between 18 and 20 into critical roles, and those into those areas that we were talking about earlier, which is the digital skills, social care, and green technologies. On the flip side, we might need to fund any level 7 apprenticeships that we have in place, possibly not the ones that we've already running because they're already running, but those will be mainly at master's level, and what the government feel is that they were traditionally from people who are older or more experienced, and therefore what they want to do is to shift that levy towards the sort of younger to upskill the employees of the company. Oh, I can't talk now either.
We know what you mean, Brennan.
Yeah.
Business, yeah, absolutely.
So it just might affect some of our future plans. So if you've got succession planning in place for what you call your future talent, where you're wanting to put them through level 7, what you might want to do is to fast track those. We're not sure of timings on this one and what will happen to funds that are already in place, but it might be that if you've got somebody that you've got in the pipeline that you feel would have benefited from that level 7 apprenticeship, you might want to sort of start fast tracking those. We've got no evidence at the moment whether that affects current apprenticeships that are in place. So where the assumption is that those can continue as they are, and you can still dip into your levy pot for the full amount rather than the 50% on that one. So it's just something for you to think about around your apprenticeships and how you're going to use your apprenticeship levy going forward. The fact that you can use them for these sort of shorter courses is a real benefit, and you might be able to just be a little bit more creative in different types of training that you provide to your your employees on that.
Yeah. I agree with that, Gwen. And I think, especially when you look at digital skills and future skill gaps you have within your sectors and industries, the apprenticeship levy is great. We max out on our apprenticeship levy as much as we possibly can. It's money to be used, but it does have limitations. So I think if this opens up the ability to focus particularly on those maybe not junior employees, entry level roles, but those mid to senior roles where you're able to introduce different training qualifications to accelerate and close out those future skill gaps will be great. I think it's interesting we look at the research, because a couple of years ago all the focus was on employee retention. It was a great resignation, it was all about talent acquisition, and a lot of the focus now within HR teams and organizations is all about development of their people. So now we've kind of gone through some of that pain, how do you now develop and retain the employees you've got? Because I think after that huge mass resignation piece, it is just how can you keep and develop the people you've got. So I think this should be a positive thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's just being a bit more creative in the way that you're using your levy, and definitely use your levy to the maximum. It's there to be used. It's otherwise that money is just going into the pot that's lost to you. So definitely, if you've got the ability to max out your levy, absolutely do it, because it's definitely to the benefit of the business to get people, everybody upskilled within the business. So, and the changing work environment that we've got going on at the moment with AI and all more digital things, we do need to sort of start adapting our employees for the new ways of working. So it's a really good way of utilising your levy for that. So I'm just going to move on. Sorry, I can't find my little button. To the Get Britain Working Scheme. So the government will soon publish a white paper setting how it will spend the 240 million, and this is trying to get 2.8 million people back into the work, partly by better signposting them to skills programs. So the white paper will outline how it's going to tackle long-term sickness support, and those who are, and this is going to be a new tagline, I can just see it now. So it's people not in education, employment or training, and they've put a little thing called NEET, and I don't know if it's good they call these people NEET, but there you are. So it's to help people develop their careers. So the 240 million funding will be divided through 8 trailblazer areas across England and Wales, and this is to test out the early intervention into ill health. So that is again trying to get people who are currently not working due to ill health. So again, that will be working with the National Health in getting them the treatment to be able to get them back into work. There'll also be extra cash that will be for 8 youth guarantee trailblazer areas, which will aim to support young people at risk of becoming NEET. So that again is to try and get that younger community upskilled to be able to have the skills to be a fully functioning employee for us in the business. So additionally to that, there'll be £150 million for the Connect to Work programme, and this is the programme to try and get people with disabilities or health conditions back into work, and it's aiming to get 100,000 people back into the workplace. So that will create more candidates for us within the business to be able to tag into. So what that will mean to us is we'll probably need to adapt some of our recruitment strategies to engage with the economically inactive individuals. There'll be probably an increased emphasis on wellbeing programs. So if we've got people that have had long-term ill health issues, bringing them back into the business will obviously have, they will need that support to come back into the business, and we'll probably need a lot more schemes to be able to make sure that we make those adjustments that are required for those people to come back into the workplace. And again, if it's around the disabled community, again, we'll probably need to make sure that we've got policies in place that protect them. So your equal opportunities and your diversity policies, make sure that they are up to date, and they suit the needs of the bigger community that's going to come into the workplace. So and there are going to be new compliance reporting expectations. So just watch this space. There's nothing in writing yet, but I think there will be something along the lines of reporting to be able to check whether this it's being effective, that the amount of money that they're spending is actually bringing in the right people back into the workplace. So I do see a lot more reporting coming our way at some point in the future, because we haven't got enough already. So
yeah, I think that's the direction of travel, isn't it? Seeing more of those.
There's definitely, because I think there are also there's going to be more people employed by the government to check that we're actually doing, bringing this to life. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot more compliance that we will need to be making sure that we're keeping up to date on as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, and just really good for social mobility. If it's something that's going to stimulate social mobility across the labour market and across the economy, then that's not a bad thing. Great to have more candidates. It's just if we can afford to hire more candidates, I think is the challenge that employers will have. If there's a load more coming back into the labour market, but there's not the jobs, so that will be the interesting play out of this over the next couple of years. But
absolutely, it's absolutely, it's that making more people available, but can we afford to employ them?
Should be positive though.
Yeah, and especially the younger communities. Before it was cheaper to employ them because the national minimum wage was lower for them, and it encouraged people to take on younger, less experienced employees. But now that there's not so much of a benefit to do that, so we within the HR communities still need to make sure that we've still got that right balance and the right diversity coming in. Good. Next slide. I think this is back to you, I'm afraid, Claire Warner.
It is, and yeah, thank you. That little break gave me the opportunity to answer some of the questions that were coming in.
Oh, great.
So I've had some tea and I've answered some questions, not all of them, I'm working my way through, but wanted to pop something in because there was a lot in the media yesterday around student finance and the increase in tuition fees. Both the maintenance loans that the student receives and the maximum tuition fees are going to increase by just over 3%. Those changes will not have an impact on payroll or what the student actually pays back. So they are just the fees that go to the university will increase, and the allowance loan that the individual has to pay for their upkeep, their living costs will both increase, and these are the rates that the student, sorry, I've gone on one slide too far. So those are the increases that are showing there. They're not dramatic in terms of the actual cost going to the employee to the university. So £340 per year for a full-time course, for example, when you consider what the rate of inflation has been in the last few years, that is only a drop in the ocean for them and their costs. However, there was lots in the media yesterday, so I wanted to make it really clear that it doesn't have an impact on the student loan payments. We do know what the student loan thresholds are for most of the plans for next year, and there has been a slight increase. Postgraduate and Plan 4 haven't been confirmed yet, So they're still outstanding for the information, but there has been a slight increase in those thresholds. But something to watch out for, particularly if you are looking to employ graduates, that threshold, particularly if you look at Plan 5, which we don't know what the threshold will be when it comes in 2026, they're getting really, really close to that minimum wage threshold. So I've just done the example of the new living wage from April of 12/21 over a 40-hour week gives you an income of £25,396. But look at what those thresholds are. There's a very fine balance to be had there. So it's worth just being aware that students or graduates, for example, may well be very aware of what the costs to them are going to be when they take a role. So albeit they still only pay above the threshold, they may well lose 9% above that threshold, which could have them looking for higher rates, shall we say. And finally, your next steps. I think the next one is me as well, so I might as well keep going. Julie, please jump in if I've missed anything on this one. So next steps for payroll professionals. Prepare some cost examples for your employees, for your employee base. Look at what that's going to do when you're setting budgets. Actually actively get involved in that budget setting process. We're quite often excluded from it, but these calculations now are going to be significant. So it's worth getting involved. Make a nuisance of yourself. I used to. I'm going to say, I know these figures. You know, I can give you this information. You've got the figures there. So have a look. Remember that the changes under minimum wage and living wage do constitute a pay increase under the Alabaster ruling. So anyone that is on parental leave, maternity in particular, you need to review those calculations and make sure that they are not going to have an impact under those rules. Consider salary sacrifice and OPRA arrangements, again, to ensure compliance, and work closely with your HR colleagues to do that. Workplace postcodes, just wanted to throw this one in. It wasn't in the budget as such, but we do know that any employers claiming Freeport or investment zone NI relief will need that data to be submitted via RTI from April. If you don't have that workplace postcode against the individual from April and you're using one of those relevant NI codes categories, your RTI will reject. So worth having a look at getting those in place for those of you that might need them. Benefits in kind, we've already mentioned, are done to death, but start the process, get your registration done, as Julie said, prepare, plan, register, talk to your software supplier and get that consultancy scheduled in. We also are going to need to be aware of two things that came out from the Employment Rights Act. No, go back a step, Claire. Employment Rights Bill. It is still proposals, but there is a lot of noise going on around the SSP and the parental leave consultations and what that's going to have an impact on in terms of, again, additional costs for the employer for SSP. But also we're going to need to do some significant software changes if they do things like remove the waiting days, remove the LEL. So that's what payroll have to look forward to for the next few months. Julie, anything to add on that?
No, I think that's a very well-rounded summary, Claire. In fact, a very, very well-rounded summary. Well done.
And I'm going to now hand over to the next steps for the payroll, for the HR and business teams. So over to you, Gwennon.
Thank you. So to reiterate, some of the points we've already made has been, we're obviously all going to be really busy over the next year, 18 months, 2 years with all of the Employment Rights Bill effect and the effects of the budget. So those of us who get involved in the budget, we need to sort of review and replan 2025. If you're not already involved in budgets, as Claire said, try and get in there. It is quite scary, but you actually learn a lot about the business as you go, as you're doing the budget. So it's I find it invaluable just to sort of get involved in those, because you can have your say and have a think about what you'll need to putting into the budget for next year. So without a doubt, we'll be updating our policies and procedures over the next year. We need to plan out our HR team's time and capacity for 2025. Review how we're going to get all of the compliance work done, as well as all of the changes that's been going on with the budget. I'd suggest try and do that now, so that you can build any additional capacity requirements that you have into your budget. If you don't have the luxury of an in-house legal team, also review how much support you're going to need from external legal advice over the next year, just to keep up with all of the employment law requirements. Again, if you can, try and do that as soon as possible so that you can build it into the budget. That would be a good idea. Definitely reiterate keeping close to your payroll colleagues or your payroll provider if you've got it externally outsourced. You'll definitely be leaning on each other quite a lot over the next year to 2 years, just to make sure that you're compliant with the new legislation that's coming your way, because things that affect payroll will automatically affect HR in the way that we have to communicate to our employees and keep them updated. Most importantly, is that keeping them updated. Communicate with your employees, keep them informed of any changes, explain why those changes are required. Don't assume that they know what's been going on in the budget, because some people don't go into that much detail on what's happening in the budget and how it will affect them. Possibly put some financial awareness training in place so that they can get a better understanding of why their payslip is looking very different from what it did, especially in April. From April, their payslip will start looking very, very different. And then obviously just make them all aware of the changes to the national minimum wage, changes into the PAYE tax thresholds. Just keep them knowledgeable about what's going on, and then that will reduce the amount of questions that will come your way, because they definitely will come your way, because payslips will look very, very different in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. So the more that we can preempt that and sort of answer those questions in advance, the better, I think. Do you agree, Claire, or have I missed anything there?
No, absolutely. I think it's a good opportunity for payroll and HR teams to be leading the charge on advising the business on a lot of the stuff. These things are always, there's not a huge amount that necessarily comes to us where we're having to advise the organisation on large scale changes that are going to impact multiple elements of the organisation, that are going to impact 2025 strategy and costs. So I think, these are always good opportunities for you to be raising credibility and demonstrate the knowledge and the value that HR and payroll have in organisations. So hopefully this will have been helpful, so that it can help you prepare whatever sort of paper or presentation you feed back to the business on things that you will collectively need to consider going into next year. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. I realise we have run over our allotted time, so apologies for that. That is a lesson learned for us, that we need to allow a little bit more time next time we do one of these. Thank you, Claire Warner, for diving into the Q&A. We've already answered a lot of the questions in there, so if you have answered a question, Claire may have dived in with a bit of copy in there to answer it. And I'm just going to take a couple of the most upvoted questions now and put those to our panel, and then we'll wrap up for today. If you do have to leave us at this point, especially because we've run over, this is all being recorded and we'll share that with you later today. Actually, you've answered even more questions I've been talking Claire, you've taken away the ones I was gonna do. So a couple of questions about how Ciphr HR product works with benefits in kind. I don't have information on that. I don't know if we have the product expertise on the call here to talk about how benefits move across to payroll and how payroll
Just quickly,
will...
yeah, I can quickly. We basically, the way we do it is that we put those benefits, the amount of the benefit, in as an allowance, and that goes through our pay link to payroll. So it works as an allowance going as a payment and a deduction on the pay slip. So all you need to do as a HR professional is to actually put that allowance start date and the amount of that benefit is worth through as an allowance through the pay link, and then it gets picked up by payroll, and they pay it and deduct it on the pay slip. Sounds simple, but lots of planning in putting it together in the first place, but once it's set up, it's quite seamless.
Catherine, you're on mute.
Thanks, Claire. Sorry, I just buttons all over the place. And then a question about implementing payrolling of benefits in kind, and how about that process and like contacting the team to set that up. Julie, can I punt that to you?
I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, contact your account manager. If you're not sure who your account manager is, you can contact me. I'll find out for you. But yeah, ultimately what needs to happen is we need to schedule some professional services time with yourselves to come in and do the configuration. So do the setup, create the benefits in kind, and get you live ready for the new tax year. Now, that work can be done at any point in time. You don't have to kind of wait till March to do the work ready for April. We could do the work today ready for April. And if you did introduce a new benefit in the meantime, you'd just let us know and we'd set that up. So yeah, talk to your account manager, and they'll be able to, sort out an order form for you, do a quote for you, because it does require some of our professional services time to do the setup. So we'll be able to get that order form out to you. You'll be able to start planning and budgeting for it.
Fantastic, thanks, Julie. And if you have more questions about payroll and benefits in kind, I did share the link to the previous webinar in the chat. So do take a look at that, and we've kind of covered that in a little bit more detail. I'm going to leave us there because we've covered a lot of questions, a lot of ground this morning. Thank you to Julie, Claire, Gwennon and Claire for joining us today and putting up in all the effort and research that I know goes on behind the scenes into putting together this broadcast. Loads of positive feedback in the comments in the chat. So thanks everybody for participating, being engaged and joining us this morning. There's a feedback form that you'll see when this finishes. That's really helpful to help us plan the next one and future broadcasts. Otherwise, if you want any more information about our solutions, you can find us at ciphr.com or email us using the address on your screen. And we hope you join us again another time for a future webinar. Thanks very much and have a great day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Okay, they've all gone. We can breathe. They've all gone.